Hello and welcome to Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis, the show that takes you on a deep dive into the happenings of the hospitality industry. Now, sometimes there's a focus on culture, and sometimes there's a focus on travel trends, and sometimes there's a focus on passion projects, but it all comes back to the industry. So much is happening here with me on Industry Night. First, we have a new home and sponsor. I'm doing most of our shows now out of the Wine Lair, which is, if you haven't heard about it, it is a private wine club. Chef John Crin is now the CEO there. You know him from Clarity, and he's invited me to do the show there now every week. Except today, I'm doing the show at a live event, the Holiday Wine and Tasting Expo at Cheeseteak. So Jill Erber is the cheesiest, and I say that wholeheartedly. Jill opened her first Cheeseteak in 2004. The one I'm sitting in today, actually, in Delray. And she now has a second one, also in Shirlington. And I'm going to talk with Jill about entertaining with cheese and all the good things that go with it. And I could really talk to Jill all day long. This is why we're such good friends, because she talks about cheese, she serves cheese, sometimes wine, and then I eat the cheese. So this is a perfect symbiotic relationship for me. So today at the Delray property, people from all over are coming in to hop from table to table and station to station, where they're going to be sipping and eating hopefully what they'll be serving this year at their holiday parties. So I'm very excited to talk with Jill, because not only does she do events like this, Jill is like the queen of programming, but there are dinners, wine dinners, cheese options, restaurants, so much more. And so I'm going to be talking to Jill about all that. But Jill also brought with her several other people who are pouring wines today at the expo. John Peters, who is a very old friend of mine. I haven't seen him in so long, from Well Crafted Beverage, and Andrea Wallace, who is from Metro Cellars. And spoiler alert, she's going to be doing some sabering on this show, which is going to be really exciting. So first, let's talk to Jill. Hey, Jill.
Hello.
It's so nice to have you with me.
It's so lovely to see you always.
Let me change that. It is so nice to be here in Delray. I hadn't been in the Delray property in a minute. So you've done a lot here since you first opened in 2004.
Yes, we have. When we first opened in 2004, we were just a little cheese shop, little shoebox size retail store. We didn't even carry wine when I first opened. It was just cheese and charcuterie. And over the years, we've expanded and added additional dining options and additional shopping options. And then this amazing thing called COVID happened. And when COVID happened,
I feel like you've yada over like almost 20 years of business, but go ahead.
Yes, it's been over 18 years, so it's pretty crazy. But what we're sitting in now is the renovated Delray location, and that was just one of the many projects that we undertook during this crazy COVID time, was to give a much needed facelift to our nearly 20-year-old location here.
But so what that meant for you though was expanding, because you did do cheese, you did have a dining capabilities here, but now it's more like the other one in Shirlington. Like you have a store and then you have a restaurant. Yes. So was that always the plan here?
So originally, yes. I mean, we always wanted to have a very integrated sort of theme with regard to having the old-fashioned cheese and wine shop coupled with the restaurant. And those two businesses can really almost literally feed off of one another. The restaurant utilizes a lot of the ingredients from the shop, and the shop really benefits from the traffic that the restaurant brings. So it was always an idea, not always, but after a few years of being open, that was the idea, was that the two would be a symbiosis, as you mentioned earlier. And so now, with the renovation here in Delray, we've really given new life to the retail store. So it really got a big facelift. It got hugely expanded, moved into a neighboring spot. So now I feel like the retail shop is really its own little beautiful gem, instead of just being kind of part of the restaurant.
Which I love. And so, but let's talk about cheese, which I love. When you offer so many kinds of cheese. We'll get into wine in a second, but how do you go about curating a cheese program? I mean, how many cheeses do you have roughly?
We usually have about a couple hundred in stock at any given time.
Okay.
It's a lot.
Different kinds, not just, okay, so how do you do that? How do you go about being like, okay, we need X amount of soft, X amount of hard, all the different varieties? How do you go about doing that?
Well, like with most things, it's some art and it's some science. So there's a lot of sort of spreadsheets involved, because when we do our ordering, we want to make sure we're not forgetting, key essential items that our customers really rely on. But as far as getting inspiration for new items and how do we know what to carry when, a lot of that comes from our customers saying, I'm seeking this thing, I saw this thing, I love this thing. I do a lot of reading, and so I discover things that way. We work with farmers directly and importers directly, and so they'll always be sharing new, really cool things that they've found.
Well, because it must be a very insular community,
yes.
right? So
yes.
Are you like on the text streams with some of the farmers? They're like, oh, hey, so-and-so is making a new cheese kind of thing?
Yes, and so sometimes we'll get sort of like the first release of certain cheeses that they're maybe even not quite sure about, and we'll bring them here and try them. So it's a lot of fun, but there's lots of different inputs. And then there's also, of course, the seasonal inputs. So at certain times of year, like right now is holiday season, and so it's all about the special occasion cheeses, seasonal ingredients in those cheeses. So it's just throughout the year, you kind of think, what is the season telling me?
Okay, so I don't think a lot of people think of cheese as a seasonal offering, right? I mean, now that you say that, that obviously makes a lot of sense. But so what cheeses are seasonal? And when you say for the holidays, I mean, I know you're doing this at a big expo here today, but what makes a cheese holiday specific? Like, what makes it holiday-ish?
So I'll answer that question first, and then we'll talk about seasonality, because I think it's really something that is not really thought about in terms of cheese, and I think it's very, very special. And so with regard to holiday cheeses, when I think of holiday cheeses, there's no sort of technical definition. When I think of a holiday cheese, I think of something that has maybe sort of seasonally appropriate types of ingredients in it. For instance, cranberries or rosemary or thyme, different herbs and spices, things that perhaps are a little more exclusive, a little bit harder to come by, that you want to say, oh, well, I'm going to spring for this now because I have my family and my loved ones coming over, so I want to spring for something really special. So a holiday cheese to me is not only an ingredient driven thing, but also the story behind it, and what do I want to share with my loved ones when they come to my home. So I want to give them something special when they come over.
Well, and I mean, listen, we have a beautiful cheese board here that your staff made, but the cheese board, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, Reels, like the cheese board, charcuterie board, like that has exploded. So, but now let's go back to seasonality first. Let's talk about seasonality, and then how does that play in how we put together our cheese boards? Because it's really I suppose there are people, and if you are one of them, no offense, but like most people are not just putting a block of cheese on a plate and being like, go at it. There's a lot of thought now going into when people entertain the cheeses that they put out, the different kinds that are there, and setting it up pretty. I mean, that's important to me. Right. So how does seasonality play into the big trend of, these massive cheese boards?
So seasonality it's from beginning to end. So it starts with the selection of the cheeses. So there are some cheeses that are released only once a year, for instance. So a couple of them that we have in stock right now, for instance, one is called Rush Creek Reserve, which is one of the most awarded cheeses in the United States. It's amazing. It's made one time a year, and it's right now. And so when Rush Creek Reserve comes out,
so it's a fresh cheese.
It's a slightly aged cheese. So it's just aged for several weeks, and so it's very squishy, kind of stinky. It has a wooden belt around the outside that's gorgeous. It's made by a cheesemaker in Wisconsin who is the most award-winningest American cheesemaker in history. So it's a huge thing. So Rush Creek Reserve comes out once a year in November, and you grab as much as you can. You let everybody know about it, and they swoop in and they grab it.
But then how long does it last? I know because I'm sort of curious about that, because I think people think, these harder cheeses or they're aged cheeses, how long will that last in my fridge?
Right. So when we take cheeses home, what I try and tell people is cheese will never taste as good as when you leave the shop with it. So people ask me all the time, how do I store my cheese?
Right.
My first answer is don't, right? Don't
just
store your cheese. Get your cheese from your shop where it is very well cared for, hopefully. Bring it home and eat it. And then when you need more, go back and get more. Don't try and store cheese in what is a very cold and drafty and dry environment, your refrigerator.
Right.
So don't try and do it. And once you cut cheese off of a wheel, it starts to degrade right away.
Much like a bottle of wine. Once you take that cork out.
Once you open it. I usually compare it to a banana.
Okay.
So if you think about a banana, and it will continue to ripen as long as the skin stays intact. But the moment you rip the peel, the banana will start to turn brown and oxidize.
Right.
So cheese is the same way. As long as that rind, that skin, remains intact, it'll age pretty well and last a really long time.
Okay.
Once you cut into it, all bets are off.
All
so
right.
You want to eat it as quickly as you can.
And so that's very interesting, and that does make a lot of sense. And obviously for your business, that makes sense to tell people to come back and buy your cheese here. But it does make sense because I'm sure lots of people think, I bought a cheese, I didn't eat it, it got mold on it. I threw it in compost.
Which you can just cut off, by the way. Just cut the mold off and eat it.
Right.
Mold is everywhere, so please just embrace the mold.
Okay, well, so let's talk about what's happening here at Cheesesteak Del Rey today, because you're doing this expo.
Yes.
And listen, you do so much programming. You're always doing wine dinners or tastings. You do stuff online. You engage with people in so many ways. I'm always blown away by it. Why do this? What is this event? Why would people come to something like this?
So the Wine Expo was really born out of a desire to make sort of the average person, so to speak, feel like they are part of the restaurant industry. So as a restaurant owner, as a wine buyer for a restaurant or a retail shop, I get invited all the time to these huge portfolio tastings. So importers will be there, distributors will be there, and there will be hundreds sometimes of wines to taste.
I've been to those. They're pretty fabulous.
They're amazing. And you will just hop from table to table and you speak to these experts and they tell you these beautiful stories, and every wine you taste is better than the last. And it's just an amazing experience. And it's not something that the average person ever has access to. And so one day I thought, it would be really cool if we could recreate something like that where the average person, our guests, could come and we would set that up for them. So that's exactly what we did. So we have multiple tables and we have experts at each table focusing on a particular theme or particular vineyard, and our guests just hop from table to table. They get their little portfolio tasting book where they get to take their notes.
I love it.
Just like you get in an industry tasting, and they get to taste dozens of different wines, talk to the experts, share great stories with each other, and then if they want to take the wines home with them, they get a great deal on the wines to take home with them.
Which is sort of how it works, right?
Yep.
Well, and I love that idea, but I wonder also, it's such a great opportunity for people to try these wines and talk with you or your staff who is equally knowledgeable about cheese and how they all go hand in hand, right?
Yes.
So how do you fit that into the expo?
So one thing that we give to everyone to remind everyone of the importance of having wines that are particularly food friendly. So I'm very big on food friendly wines. There are lots of amazing wines out there that are perhaps even intended to be drunk solo. In other words, they're not necessarily great food wines.
Yeah.
Almost everything we do here at Cheesesteak is a great food wine. That's why they live here, is because they go great with cheese and charcuterie and other foods. So a way to remind people of that is every guest that comes to the Wine Expo gets what we call our cheese and charcuterie cone.
Okay.
It looks like an ice cream cone. It sounds silly, but it's awesome. And it's full of cheese and charcuterie and olives and corn nuts and crackers. And they walk around with their cone and they can eat their little cheese snack.
That's so
and
smart.
Taste these wines and pair them. And it's super, super fun. So that's a little way of injecting kind of the.
So the cone is
cheese.
Competing with the board. Is that what's happening here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like your own personal board that you can carry in your hand. If you think of it that way.
Yeah, I love it. That's such a smart idea. All right. So we're going to bring in John. We're going to talk about wine with John.
I would love that.
And then we're going to do some sabering. And then I'm going to bring you back and we'll talk about what's happening with the holidays, because gift baskets and all the great things that are going to be available here, champagne for New Year's, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to bring you back at the end.
Wonderful. Okay? I'm going to scooch right over.
So in with me next is John Peters from Well Crafted Beverage. John and I go
way back.
Incredibly way back, before I was even in the industry, when I was a food lover. But John was with a different wine company and introduced me to a slew of California wines that I just loved. But now you're with Well Crafted Beverage,
yes,
which is a small boutique.
We specialize in the 5,000 case production winery, which generally relates to estate bottle, hand-picked, sort of the micro production, not the big production.
Okay, well, explain that for people, because people who love wine, but don't have a huge wine understanding, don't understand what 5,000 means.
Sure.
How does that work for your business model and what you all do?
Well, 5,000 cases would be extremely small.
Okay.
I think in California terms, 35,000 case would be medium size. So,
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be expensive just because it's small production. It just means that they make wines in a small, maybe they only own 5 acres and they're
Right.
making wines. It doesn't always relate to being more expensive because it's small production.
But I think people think small production means a more nuanced wine, that the work on the wine is different because you're not dealing with big vats of wine, right?
Hands-on small batches, exactly. It's generally a higher quality wine because of it,
Okay.
because of the attention that it gets.
So let's talk about how you guys go about, like I was talking with Jill earlier about how she curates her cheese. How do you curate your wines? How do you find these smaller boutique wineries that aren't producing nearly as much?
Well, when we're traveling around, if one person says we have to go see them, it's okay. If the second person says we have to go see them, okay. If 3 people on our trip says you have to go see this place, then we know this is a place we have to go see.
Okay.
And typically we find a winery within each region and make that our wine exclusive, in the sense that we typically don't represent other wineries from that area.
Oh, so you're really exclusive in that way.
Exactly.
So when we talk about regions, what are you guys global? Are you in regions all around the world?
Absolutely.
Do you focus more on old world wine versus new wines?
We're,
How does it work for you all?
We're all over the board. I mean, we started as the Spanish wine company, so we are pretty heavy in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we do a very large California production. South Africa is actually one of our groups that we do very well with, and actually represent probably 4 or 5 wineries from that area. But
Okay.
I don't see as many people representing South African wines.
No, I feel like South Africa had like a moment a couple years back. There was a bit of a push, but then I think Australia and New Zealand wines got the money
Sure.
to push through from a marketing standpoint.
Right.
So, just for somebody who's in the media side of it, I see what I get pitched, right? So the wines that I get press releases about or pitched about or winemakers coming to town about is not South African. It is the New Zealand guys are coming here all the time,
Sure.
right? They're in town a lot and they're pouring a lot. Same thing with Australia, and there is a lot of money behind some of those Australian wines. So don't you think that has a lot to do with it?
Sure. For us, we happen to have some of the best South African wines.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were drinking South African wines early on, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
you need to come back and try them again,
Okay.
because they were very popular in the beginning, and then, like so many areas, everyone was grabbing for brands to bring to the United States. I think the quality level dropped a bit because these were high production wines.
Gotcha.
And come back and taste South Africa.
Okay,
because
well,
there's some
let's
great
talk about
wines.
this one that you poured. Tell
Okay.
me about it.
So this is Ramukta.
Mm-hmm.
Say that fast 3 times.
I'm not doing it.
Ramukta is the name of the property. Actually, Chris Boostred was just here. We had a tasting.
Hung out with him for probably too long.
Wow.
He was probably like, can I go now?
No, we had a great time. But so we tasted these wines, and that's why we picked them for today's tasting.
Okay.
We picked the Honey Bunch, which is a Chenin Blanc
Mm.
wine. Chenin Blanc is the grape of South Africa for white. And this is actually about 12 months in barrel, so it sees some oak treatment. This would be the kind of wine you might offer somebody who likes Chardonnay, but maybe not the big oaky styles.
Right.
And personally, I picked it because Thanksgiving's around the corner.
No, this is a gorgeous. I mean, Jill was talking earlier about wines that go with food, and this does go. I could see it going beautifully with lots of different food.
So mouth-watering.
Right, it's delicious, but I could also. It's also a very drinkable
Absolutely.
wine. Like it like the acid is not too much. The sugar is not too high. Like everything about it feels really nice.
The only thing missing here are the crab cakes.
Right? You find that you want this with seafood, I hear.
Well, that richness calls for seafood, but I mean, again, turkey,
Cheese,
massive
cheese.
butter.
Let me help you here, John.
Hello.
Cheese,
Hello.
right,
Yeah, lots of good cheese.
right.
I tend to like the harder cheeses with wine because they tend to work better, but
Mm.
I think we'll leave
the cheese component
yes,
to Jill.
to Jill, exactly.
Well, I'll ask Jill when she comes back to talk about what kind of cheese you would pair with this. Actually, can you guys hear her if she talks? Yeah. Okay. So we'll just cut that out if you don't mind. So Jill, what kind of cheese would you pair with this?
So what I love about this is a very universally delicious wine. But one thing that jumps out to me right away is that it will taste really wonderful with anything very salty. So I want this wine almost like, think of it as a contrast, right? So it has a little bit of that richness and not a sweetness. It's not a sweet wine, but it's got great fruit. So I want this with olives, and I want this with blue cheese. So blue cheese is notoriously difficult to pair with wine because it's very heady, very robust, very piquant, very salty, and it will drown out almost anything else that you pair with it. So you put something like this blue cheese, for instance, with this really full, rich, wonderfully textured white, and it's gonna stand up to it, and it's gonna complement it really beautifully. So it won't get lost.
Right. I think that makes. I totally see salt with this. That makes so much sense to me. Yeah. So John, while you guys are finding these small boutique vineyards, the stories that are told, the people behind the wine, do they have great narratives? Is that important to part of your curation?
Absolutely. You always hear about people getting into the wine business because they made money somewhere else.
You do hear a lot of that.
But really, I think the heart and soul for us, I mean, let's face it, it's farming.
Right. Oh, it's ag. No, totally with you. It's agriculture.
And you can tell who lives it every day because the love, the passion, and of course the quality in the bottle. So.
All right. Well, you got another wine that you're pouring here today. Why don't you tell us about it?
All right.
I hate to pour this out, but I'm going to.
I hate to do it.
The second wine we're doing today is the Southern Belle.
Okay.
From Umea. This is 2 grapes, if I may.
Now, where is Southern Belle from?
From Umea, which is sort of southern Spain, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, the bottle is gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
I should pour some for myself.
Yes, pour some for yourself.
It's mainly Monistral with a little bit of Syrah.
Okay. What was the first grape?
Monistral.
Okay.
Monistral. So, funny story behind this one. Dan Phillips, the producer, gets Pappy Van Winkle barrels.
Okay, that's a chef favorite.
And all of these wines are finished in Pappy Van Winkle.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not a big bourbon barrel guy with wine, but
because
it tends to overpower the fruit of the wine.
Because of the char?
Yes. Tell me. I mean, can you taste?
I don't taste it.
It's real.
It's so elegant. It's so awesome.
Yeah, juicy, very refreshing. Again, a wine that certainly.
But not juicy in the way that sometimes a juicy red, you sort of feel like it's gonna dye your teeth red. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you ever?
It tastes like a hangover.
Yeah, like, like sometimes like you drink red all night, you come home, you look in the mirror, you're like, oh my god, my teeth are red. Oh my god, it's scary. But this does not feel that way. It's full fruit, but it's nice and dry.
Yes, definitely a dry finish.
It's beautiful. All right, Jill.
Yes.
We're putting your powers to test here.
Absolutely.
What are we pairing with this?
So this is actually perfect. I did not even realize this is the one that we were going to be tasting. So I love it. So for this one, I want to go all out hard-aged sheep's milk cheese.
Okay.
So I'm thinking a hard-aged manchego. We have one called Roncal here on the platter, which is a raw sheep's milk cheese from Spain. Anything that is rich and heavy and sort of oily in a sense, and oily in a good way. Like it's just a rich, fatty cheese, but it's hard-aged, so it's got this great texture. They're chewy, and they are just screaming for bright, fresh fruit like this.
But what's interesting is I don't think a lot of people think to serve a red with cheese. It's always whites or sparklings or things of that nature. People really pull back from a red with cheese. But you're saying...
Well, because I think they tend to choose reds that are not great cheese pairs. So
sure.
A lot of people love drinking, for instance, big, bold Cabernet.
Right.
That's great.
That's not going with the cheese.
You may as well be eating a piece
right.
of
Wrap it around a
anything.
steak. I hear you.
Doesn't matter. You need something with a little bit more nuance if you're going to be pairing it with cheese, because your typical cheese is not going to knock your face off. So you want something that is elegant, that is balanced. The tannins can't be too high when you're pairing with cheese, or your mouth will feel like it's sticking together.
Right.
So you want something that's fresh, that has great acid and great fruit. So as long as you're pairing the right red with your cheese, they are awesome. And I think some people just make a mistake when they're pairing.
Well, I think probably, and John, you could speak to this too. I mean, some people just like a certain wine, right? So they like I like Mount Etna. You know, that's sort of my go-to with a red. I love my Mount Etna reds, but it's a bold, ashy wine. I don't think it's really going to go with a light cheese platter. You know, it needs something heartier to go with it. So I think that's probably the mistake is that people drink the wine that they want to be drinking, not necessarily what they should be drinking to complement.
And what I always tell people though is when it comes down to it, cheese and wine, they're very spiritual things. They're almost emotional, right? So to me, if you have a wine that you love and you have food that you love, there's no such thing as a bad pairing.
Right.
There can be some that will be better, but are they really going to sing together? Maybe not.
Right.
But you're gonna love A and you're gonna love B, and A and B they're gonna make you happy.
That makes
When
sense.
you have them together. So
I think half the fun is experimenting.
yes,
right?
for sure.
Find out what you like.
Well, and I also like the idea of opening multiple bottles,
Yes.
right? Like, I think people get really nervous with wine. There's a lot of nerves when it comes to wine. You know, people are afraid of wasting it, or, you know, like, I always say, if you order a bottle of wine and you don't like it, don't drink it. Like, it's just a bottle of wine. Like, you don't have to like everything. So for you, John, in the wine biz, and since you guys are global and you're collecting all these interesting wines from around the world, what are some of the other regions that you are really excited about right now that you guys have in your portfolio?
Well, certainly I grew up in this business, so, you know, they say new world, old world. I love it all. So
Can you explain for people who don't know what New World means, what Old World means?
Well, New World usually is from like California or Chile, Argentina. These are brighter, fuller bodied, higher alcohol wines.
Also, newer
forward.
vines.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
can be. Yeah,
right?
exactly. And then, you know, Old World being sort of Italy, France. These are wines that are more nuanced and might take a couple tastes to really understand the flavor, where New World gives you a lot more up front. So to me, New World is just a fruitier, more forward style.
Okay.
Old World being a little more reserved, and it takes a little time to fully understand through tasting the wines.
So with that in mind, what are you thinking for the holidays? Like, if you were selecting, not just, you know, all the holidays, but in general, like if you were selecting a couple of wines from your portfolio that you're like, either I'm giving it as a gift or I want this on my table, what are some that you're, or what to watch for in 2023? I can't believe I'm saying 2023.
I know.
What do you think?
Well, for this time of year, certainly Oregon Pinot Noir gets me very excited. There's a lot of good things coming out of Oregon. Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris. But then on the Old World side, I mean, a nice Valpolicella could work on the table as well with the Thanksgiving meals. So,
sure.
A wide range. I mean, for me, it's you know, it's like music or art. You know, it's what kind of mood I'm in, what kind of food I'm serving, that makes the decision on what we're going to have at the table.
Okay, I love that. And where can people find your company, either online or obviously here? I know, but where can we find you, online or on Instagram?
Both.
Okay.
But at the same time, you know, we do distribute throughout DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So.
Great. Okay, great. Here comes Andrea Wallace from Metro Cellars.
Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I really appreciate you jumping out because I know this Wine Expo is about to like break bad here at Cheesecake in Delray. So I would love to know a little bit about you and your wine journey, how you got here.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been doing this for over a decade now. So how I got here seems like a story from 1,000 years ago. But I basically was in sales in Washington State and decided I should not live in the same place my whole life, and convinced some schmuck to hire me to sell his portfolio.
Excellent. Well, it looks like you did a very good job.
And here I am, over 10 years later.
But why love wine? Why sell wine?
So I've always really been fascinated in alcohol in general, in the process of making wine or spirits, the integration of art and science, and how you can get so many different expressions and so many different kind of experiences. And there is an artistic touch that's necessary, but it really does all break down to chemical reactions and science and things like that. So that was really what fascinated me about wine in general, because I have a science background.
Okay, so you love wine. Now you're selling wine. How did you go about working with Metro Cellars, and what was it about sort of what they do and the kinds of wines that they keep in their portfolio that turned you on?
So I have known Chris and Mary Beth, the owners of Metro Cellars, since I began in the wine business. And I've worked for different companies throughout. And when I decided to go and work for them, one of the things that I really loved about the portfolio is that it was full of smaller production, environmentally conscious producers. And they really focus on the vineyard health and sustainability, which is important to me. And I just thought they really did a good job of selecting the portfolio.
Well, let's dive down a little deep on that. What does that mean today with climate change and all these things affecting, vineyards around the world? How are vineyards best sustainable? What does it mean to your company or to the winemakers you work with? Are we talking about biodynamic? Are we talking about natural? Like, what are we talking about as far as the production of the wine?
So that is different for each producer, right? They have to figure out how they can be most sustainable given the challenges that they face. One thing that sustainability does allow is if you have to resort to chemical use in your vineyard, you have a little bit more flexibility. Most our producers don't. Most of them are organic. A lot of them are biodynamic, which is a different type of farming. But one of the things
biodynamic is like voodoo, right? It's like plant something here, put the moon over there, right? Like it's a
not,
whole.
It's not voodoo.
But you know what I mean.
There's a horn involved.
Right.
There is a horn
Don't
involved.
you have to plant something, right? You have to plant something.
A horn.
Okay, I knew there was something.
There's bugs.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. So biodynamic practices date back to pagan times. And we didn't have watches and things like that. We didn't even necessarily understand time and seasons. I mean, they did understand them, but not in the same way we do.
Not with technology, right.
Yeah. So what did they do to figure out when it was time to harvest? They counted the phases of the moon. They did other tools to figure out when they should do each part of their farming practices to keep track of time. And they used a lot of the horn and the crystals is all about kind of reintroducing nitrogen and sulfurs back into the soil, different ways that they did them. So a little part voodoo, a lot of just the old ways we used to do things.
But it's what's interesting to me is how many vineyards are some vineyards have been doing it for a long, long time, but now it is a marketing tool. People do, talk about it more. And I don't know how much the layperson knows about biodynamic and what it means to what's in the bottle.
So here's what I will say is wine is made in the vineyard. That may sound like a cliche term, but really it is. It is, if you do not grow quality grapes, you either don't make quality wine or you have to manipulate it so much to get there that, it's not really what it was in the vineyard. So wine is made in the vineyard. Most of your growers will tell you that. Most of your winemakers will tell you that. And if anybody is willing to commit the labor and the attention to their vineyards that is required to farm biodynamically, they are putting a lot of love and a lot of care and a lot of thought into their vineyards. There's a focus on biodiversity with biodynamic farming, which really makes the soil much healthier because if we think of other agricultural farming, we typically move things every few years because we deplete the soil. Well, you can't move vineyards, so you have to find different ways to rejuvenate and re-enrich the soil.
Right, because it takes so much out of them, right? Okay, so let's talk about the wines you brought in today. What'd you bring me?
So I brought you two natural wine producers.
Okay. So let's talk about natural wine because it's kind of got a dirty name at the moment. Like there are people who love it You know, like the real, like, sort of like wine nerds out there, like all about natural wine. You see some wine programs, especially in DC, but nationally, it's a trend to have either a natural section or, you know, serve only natural wines.
Right.
I think a lot of people are like, isn't wine natural? What does that mean?
So there's no legal determination of what constitutes something being natural or not. But there is kind of an industry expectation and standard of what it means to be natural. And it means you're just not adding stuff in the winemaking process. So one of the most common things that we add in when we make wine is we introduce commercial non-native yeasts.
Okay.
And that helps catalyze and kickstart the fermentation process. But there's yeast already existing within the
because of the sugars, right?
On the skins, on the sugars. I mean, once you make wine in your winery, you'll have some yeast floating in the air. Just like if you were to make bread all the time in your kitchen, you're going to have yeast that get into the air. So there's natural yeasts in the environment when you're making wine. When you are introducing these catalysts and these things to help your winemaking process, you have a lot more control. When you're not, you again have to make sure that what you're doing is quality. It's a labor of love. You have to pay a lot more attention to make sure it's going the way that you want to do it. But one of the main things is not adding and introducing commercial yeast, not adding things like acidity if you don't like the acidity level that your grapes have.
Okay.
So things like that, you're not adding to the process to manipulate the way your wine is going to taste. Now that cloudier style is definitely a style that we're seeing trend. And I always compare it to if you're a beer drinker and you kind of like a sour beer.
Sour beers. Yeah, totally.
And I mean, there's definitely a place for them. I enjoy a sour beer, and I don't mind a good natural wine as well. All
right, well, why don't you pour one? Let's see what we got. Yeah. Jill is going to taste it and then tell us where she is with a natural wine. And thank you. And what kind of cheese she would pair with it. So now tell me what vineyard this is from and where it's from.
So this is from Touraine in the Loire Valley. It's Clos Rousselet. It is a family-owned estate. Clos meaning wall, so there's literally a wall around the vineyard. These guys, like I said, are natural. They are farmed organically with some biodynamic practices integrated. This is really an old school way of making wine, though.
Okay.
Oh, good.
This is delicious.
Sorry.
The vineyards,
it's amazing.
Yeah, the vineyards themselves sit on top of the cellar, which is this old dugout tunnels that were dug out to build the castle that sits nearby. So they go on for miles underneath ground.
This is
it's awesome.
A ridiculous wine.
So it's 100% Sauvignon Blanc.
Wow.
So
but
I think a lot of people think of Sauvignon Blanc as being like super tropical, especially if you're coming from, like New Zealand, Sauvignon Blanc, for instance.
Right.
This has a little bit of that tropical, but I love the French Sauvignon Blancs because they tend to have a lot of earth and like stone to anchor them, and this is like...
They're just clean. To me, a French Sauvignon Blanc is just clean. I don't mind the New Zealands, I don't, but the minerality in them sometimes is really propped up, and I feel like it or the lemon in them, or whatever they're doing there. I'm like, okay, I mean, I see it, but to me, this is what a Sauvignon Blanc should taste like. It's just perfect.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. All right, what kind of cheese am I putting with this, Jill?
So this is all about a lighter, fresher, creamy cheese.
Right.
Ideally, the oldest combination in the world, one of them is a wine like this with what's called chèvre, which is a fresh, creamy goat's milk cheese.
Right.
So this one with any sort of fresh, creamy cheese is just going to be
It's going to be perfect?
Yeah.
Okay. So fresh cheese with this one. That makes sense. Okay, tell me about the next one you're going to pour.
So the next one is also a natural wine. It is called Ricoterra. Ricoterra is the name of the vineyard. It's in Riverland, Australia, which is pretty hot and dry climate. So the winemaker, Ashley Radcliffe, when he started this project, he'd actually been at Yalumba, which is a really large, very well-respected producer of wine in Australia. When he left, he bought this property, and nothing had really been planted there yet in any kind of serious fashion. So he decided, rather than kind of committing to the traditional Shiraz and just planting a bunch of it, he would plant a lot of different varietals that tend to do well in hot and dry climates. So he focused on Mediterranean varietals.
Fascinating.
So that's why he calls it bullets over cannonballs, because back in the day when they were on ships, a seasoned sailor would not shoot his cannons first. He would shoot his bullets to see where the trajectory went and then aim his cannonballs.
Beautiful. All right.
So this is a red blend. Like I said, it's mostly varietals from the Mediterranean. So we have a little Tempranillo, some Shiraz, some Lagrange, Aglianico, and Lambrusco, actually.
So that's like a big Greek grape. Oh, that is so fascinating.
So I'm going to have to hurry you along only because I hear the event like popping out there, and I know you got to get out to your table so you can pour this. So let's just talk quickly about Sabering.
Okay.
Because Jill has a Sabering night here at Cheesetique every Sunday?
It's every Sunday.
Every Sunday. And there's specialties like holiday stuff and Saber, like there's special Sabering nights. Talk to me just a little bit about what Sabering is and how you do it.
So you want to make sure when you're sabering a bottle, first of all, that you have the right pressure inside the bottle. It's for sparkling wine only. And I would recommend
and do not do Lambrusco, please.
No Lambrusco, nothing that's the Charmant method. You want when you're doing it, you really want higher quality wines that have a similar pressure inside the bottle to champagne. Because what you're really doing is you're using the pressure inside the bottle and you're exploiting the weak side of the bottle.
Okay.
So when you are sabering,
yes,
you want to get your bottle really nice and cold, like cold.
Okay.
Cold. And then you look for the seam. Every bottle has a seam. This one has one
so
right
going
here.
Up vertically. The seam vertically.
Literally the seam where they seamed the bottle together.
Okay.
So you want to have that.
Facing you.
That seam right on top.
Right.
And what you're targeting is this weak spot right here.
Where the seam and the top of the bottle
come together.
Amazing.
And you want to take the Saber. Do we have the Saber?
We do.
We do have a Saber. Can you reach it there, Nycci?
I can.
So obviously I will not be sabering this.
Sorry about that.
Right. I know you're going to do this later, but just so we can see.
Yeah, so what you would want to do is take it right along and just basically push that top off.
Amazing.
And you're just basically pushing that top. I will say when you saber, do not hold up here. Do not hold.
Right.
You need to make sure you're holding at the very bottom of the bottle.
Well, and what Jill has told me is that, while it's dull. It's very dull. But
and if you use your knife at home, don't use the sharp side.
Okay.
Don't ruin your blade.
Don't ruin your blade. Okay, great. All right, well, so later we'll get to see you do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today and pouring these great wines. Just tell us quickly, where can we find either you or your company on Instagram or online?
Yeah, we have a website at metrocellars.com. And I think there is an Instagram presence as well.
Great.
For us. So, just look us up.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
you. All right, go out there and pour some wine.
I'll see you out there.
Okay. All right, Jill, come back over to me. So, very exciting talking with both of them today.
Yes.
Really all very different wines.
Yes.
So we talked a lot about what you do with cheese, but we haven't really talked about how you go about working with these experts to offer the kinds of wines that you do here, because you're very specific about what you want to carry. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So what I have found in my relationship with our vendors is that the personal relationship and the knowing one another is the most important. So the perfect example is Andrea. So I have worked with Andrea since she has pretty much started this business. So 10 years we've worked together. And when she has grown in her career and moved from to different companies, we basically follow her wherever she is going. So
because you like her.
We like her.
I love that.
And she knows us so well and has worked with us for so long and truly has our best interest in mind, right? So I go where she goes because wherever she goes is going to be great. They're going to have great wine. And I don't lose that sort of knowledge that she has about what our vision is and what our mission is with wine. So, and we have that sort of history with so many different vendors that's really, really essential, where we've worked with some of them for 18 years since we have opened.
Wow.
And as their companies have grown, we've grown with them. And so a lot of it is just about them knowing what we're going for and knowing the kinds of things to bring to us first. And so we've worked with them for so long that they know, oh, we've got to bring this to Cheesetique. Before anyone else gets it, we've got to bring this to Cheesetique. And I think, so like with so many things, it's about that relationship.
Sure. Well, and I think what's interesting is between the vast amount of cheeses and the vast amount of wines. The question is really then how do you take the knowledge on both the cheese and the wine, because now you've got like this huge like encyclopedia mind, and then pass it on to the customer or the person who comes in, because listen, it's a gorgeous cheese display. This is not meant as a criticism, but like it's overwhelming.
Yes.
To look at all those cheeses and be like, I mean, I don't know. How do I begin to communicate to you what I'm doing and what I should have? Like, so how do you have that conversation with people about the cheeses and then the wines?
Well, I guess the first place I always start is to try and make it very relaxed for people, because I think people get very intimidated when it comes to wine because they're afraid of feeling stupid or looking stupid or uninformed. And with cheese, they when my mother first saw our cheese case when we were about to open, she stood there with her jaw hanging open and said, I didn't even know there were this many cheeses in the world.
Wow.
So in other words, a lot of people have that feeling. So we want to just take the glamour off, right? And be like, look, wine is great, cheese is great. For the most part, they're going to be tasty together. Don't sweat it, right? So we try and make it a very relaxed process, and then we try to ease people into it. So I'm not going to give lots of sips and samples and pair things, to let people know there's no wrong way to do it. Right? We're not curing cancer here, right? We're enjoying.
We're talking food and wine.
Right. So let's just let it be this joyous, wonderful thing, and not let it be heavy, and there's no mistakes to be made. And then people usually do pretty well.
I love that. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things before we wrap up.
Sure.
You do a ridiculous amount of programming.
So much programming.
At both locations.
Yes.
How do you manage all that, and what are we looking forward to, really with the holidays coming up and even into January? I mean, aside from gift baskets, all that, I mean, like there's you're doing, you have your fingers in so many pots in two places.
Right.
So what's here? What can people find? How do you help them sort it out?
Yeah, so I mean, as you mentioned, we have the gift platters, and we have the baskets and the entertaining things and the catering things. We have all of that. But really, I think what sets the holidays apart for us are all of our cool events that we're doing. So we have still our Meet the Winemaker events where you get to spend the evening with the winemaker. We do beautiful wine dinners. We have wonderful online classes so that when your family comes in town and you're like, gee, what are we going to do the Wednesday before Thanksgiving? You're going to come to my class online is what you're going to do. And you're going to get
because it's a fun family activity.
The best experience in the world, because you get everyone together around a big thing of cheese and you watch a class for an hour, and we laugh and taste together and learn, and it's like a great way to have family visit. So through that, we're introducing a caviar program. We have never had caviar before. I'm like so nervous and so excited.
Okay.
So we've got that coming this holiday season. So there's lots of really cool ways to make cheese and wine be experiential, which is always our mission. Make it an experience. Okay,
and lastly, so the Sabering here. When is it? What is it? Do I get to do it? What's happening?
Yes. So we every Sunday from 3:00 on, in both locations, we have what's called Saber Sunday, where any guest can come in. They choose from a spectrum of wines that they want, and then we will teach them, and they actually get to savor their own bottle, and then they get to sit and enjoy the bottle. It is the most fabulous thing ever.
It sounds like so much fun.
People love it. They will bring like gaggles of their friends.
And because everybody wants to try it.
And I thought it would be like a big group and they'd get one bottle and one. No, there will be groups of 8 people and they'll get 8 bottles.
Oh my God, you need like an Uber code to get people home afterwards.
But it is so funny, and they love it, and it just makes people feel great. So we love Sabering, and we do it every Sunday. And then
tell everybody where they can find you online, both locations. Give us the whole 411.
Yes, we are on the web at cheeseteak.com, and we are on Instagram and Facebook at cheeseteak. So just look us up.
Okay, and it's all there. Great. Well, I want to thank you so much. I know you have to get out to that wine expo. Yes. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you for joining me today here on Industry Night. I'm at Cheeseteak here for this wine expo. I'm going to go around and taste a whole bunch more wines. I'm going to taste some caviar. The caviar she's talking about is Sarah Mayo, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago. So I can't wait to see her. And I do want to thank all of you for joining me here today. Don't forget, everything you heard here today you can find on the liststareyouwantit.com. Sorry, I've got wine in my corners of my mouth. The online e-zine that tells you everything that's happening in the DC metro area. Of course, you can tune in every Sunday at 11 a.m. on 1500 a.m. for Foodie and the Beast. You can hear me on WTOP. You can follow me at NYCCI, NELLIS, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for all the fun things I'm eating and drinking and all the traveling I am doing. And you can check us out now, Industry Night at the Wine Lair. Thanks so much for joining us today. My reminder that I give you every week, take your kindness pills when you go out. No restaurant wants you to have a bad experience. Shortages are real, staffing shortages, as well as product delays, things of that nature. So just go and have a good time. That's the point. So be good out there and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.